Hello, Muslim friends of the world. John Walker was a charismatic pastor of a small church in a small town in Alabama, United States. He was known as a humble, compassionate, and deeply devout figure who faithfully upheld the teachings of his religion. Each week, hundreds of people crowded into his church to hear his passionate sermons about God's love and the need to resist the evils of the world. However, behind his friendly face and sincere smile, John Walker harbored a hidden agenda. He was part of a small group called the Shield of Truth, an organization that believed Islam was the greatest threat to Christianity in America and the world. This group was determined to weaken Islam's influence through propaganda, manipulation, and covert missions. John hadn't always thought this way. Early in his career as a pastor, he focused purely on preaching and serving his congregation. But after the events of September 11th, he became influenced by the narrative that Islam was the source of violence and a threat to Western freedom. His convictions were further solidified after attending several seminars and training sessions organized by the Shield of Truth. One sunny afternoon, Pastor John Walker stepped out of his small church in Alabama. With a Bible in hand, he walked toward his car, ready to head home after a long day of preparing his Sunday sermon. But his steps halted as he noticed a group of men in the park across from the church. In the middle of the group, a young man with a neatly trimmed beard was speaking passionately. Pastor Walker approached to hear what they were discussing. It turned out that the man, dressed in simple clothing characteristic of a Muslim, was explaining the teachings of Islam to his friends. He spoke about the importance of Tawhid, the oneness of God, the compassion embedded in Islamic teachings, and universal moral values. Hearing this, John Walker's blood stirred. This is my chance, he thought. With conviction, he walked toward the group and interrupted. "Excuse me, I'm Pastor John Walker. I overheard your conversation, and I'd like to know, do you feel confident enough to discuss your beliefs in front of my congregation?" he challenged, his tone firm yet polite. The Muslim man smiled. "My name is Ahmad. If your congregation is open to listening, I have no objections." "When and where?" Ahmad replied calmly. Pastor Walker immediately arranged the meeting. On Sunday after the service, Ahmad would come to the church to discuss religion with the pastor in front of the Christian congregation. The anticipated day arrived. The church was packed, with some people standing in the aisles as all the seats were taken. News of this debate had spread across town, and many were eager to see how Pastor Walker, known for his deep theological knowledge, would defend his faith. Ahmad arrived on time, carrying only a small Quran in his hand. He was met with skeptical gazes from most of the congregation. Pastor Walker stood at the pulpit while Ahmad sat in a chair prepared at the front. Pastor Walker opened the discussion by introducing Ahmad and explaining that this meeting was about seeking truth with an open heart. But behind those words, he was ready to passionately defend Christianity. John Walker began the discussion with a sharp question. "Ahmad, if God is all-loving, why does Islam emphasize punishment so much? Doesn't that indicate that the God of Islam is cruel?" he asked. Ahmad smiled. "Pastor Walker, God in Islam is the most compassionate and the most merciful. Before I answer, may I ask, do you agree that rules and justice are necessary to maintain order?" Pastor Walker nodded. "Islam teaches compassion, but compassion without justice leads to chaos. Punishment in Islam exists only to maintain balance and protect society. In fact, God says in the Quran that He prefers forgiveness over punishment. Isn't that also what Christianity teaches? Ahmad replied. Pastor Walker was momentarily stunned but quickly followed up with another question. How can you claim that the Quran is the true scripture when the Bible came first? Ahmad gently responded, We Muslims never belittle the Bible or the Torah. Islam teaches that those books also came from God, but over time, their texts have been altered. The Quran came as the final guide and completion. For example, in the Quran, Prophet Isa, Jesus, is mentioned over 20 times, and always with great respect. Isn't that a sign that we honor your beliefs? Ahmad's response created a hush over the church. The congregation seemed to be processing his words carefully. After a few more questions, Pastor Walker decided to challenge the core of Islamic belief. Ahmad, Jesus is God incarnate who came to save us. Why do you deny this? He asked, his voice full of conviction. Ahmad nodded slowly and replied, Pastor Walker, let's reflect on this together. Do you believe that God is all-powerful? Of course, Walker answered. If God is all-powerful, why would He need to become human to save His creation? Isn't He capable of simply saying be, and it is? Wouldn't making God into a human form limit His greatness? The congregation fell silent. Walker tried to respond but couldn't find the right words. Ahmad continued, We Muslims deeply respect Prophet Isa. He is one of the greatest prophets. But we believe that God is one and does not need a physical form to demonstrate His power. That is the essence of Tawhid, monotheism. As the debate ended, the congregation appeared deeply moved by Ahmad's calm demeanor and compelling arguments. Many whispered among themselves, discussing how Ahmad had answered every question with clarity and reason. Pastor Walker concluded the discussion with a pale face. He realized that he had lost the debate in front of his congregation. However, he respectfully shook Ahmad's hand. You are a very intelligent man, Ahmad. I appreciate your courage, he said. Ahmad smiled. And I respect you for being willing to host this discussion. May God guide us all. After the event, some members of the congregation became curious about Islam. A few even invited Ahmad for private discussions. Meanwhile, Pastor Walker began to reflect deeply on his own beliefs and whether he truly understood the religion he had been opposing. That Sunday became the start of an extraordinary transformation that would change the small town in Alabama forever. Pastor John Walker, who had been confident he would win the debate against Ahmad, a humble Muslim man, had to face the bitter reality that his arguments were no match for Ahmad's logic and gentle responses. When the debate ended, the church fell silent. The congregation, loyal to their pastor, seemed awestruck, confused, and inspired all at once. Ahmad, with a friendly smile, bid everyone farewell and left the church. But he left behind more than just words. He planted seeds of change in the hearts of his listeners. One Sunday morning, before his remaining congregation, John Walker stood at the pulpit for the last time. He delivered a message that shocked everyone. My dear brothers and sisters, after years of leading you, I feel that God has shown me a different path. I have embraced Islam as the truth. I do not compel you to follow me, but I invite you to seek the truth for yourselves. Do not fear to ask questions, as I once did. That day, the majority of the congregation wept. They did not cry because they had lost their leader but because they, too, felt the same calling to embrace Islam.